The office lights flickered to life each morning at Brookstone Marketing Agency, a place where glass walls and sleek furniture gave an impression of openness, but where the truth was far more complicated. Among its employees, a certain couple, Richard and Claire, were well known, not for brilliance or compassion, but for the sharpness of their tongues and the cold superiority with which they regarded those they believed beneath them. They were polished, articulate, and ambitious, but their success had hardened into arrogance. When a poor black man named David entered their orbit, he became an easy target for their scorn. David was not an employee, at least not at first. He came into the agency quietly, working part-time as a courier, running deliveries, and managing odd jobs to make ends meet. His wife, Angela, who worked long hours at a small diner, sometimes dropped by to bring him lunch. Their love was visible, the kind of gentle, dignified bond that did not require words. But to Richard and Claire, their very presence felt like an intrusion. They would laugh under their breath when Angela walked in, mocking the simplicity of her clothes, the way she carried herself. They made jokes about David's humble job, insinuating that someone like him had no place in a building filled with people who thought of themselves as sophisticated professionals. David endured it quietly. He lowered his eyes when they sneered, choosing not to fight back with words that would only fuel their cruelty. He carried an aura of quiet strength, though the pain of humiliation was heavy inside him. He had grown up learning that sometimes silence was not weakness, it was patience. What Richard and Claire never knew was that behind the delivery man's calm exterior was a man who read deeply, who thought critically, and who believed in self-improvement no matter how small his opportunities appeared. One late afternoon, fate set into motion a story neither the couple nor the rest of the agency could have predicted. The CEO, Mr. Jonathan Pierce, a seasoned man in his late 50s, known for his sharp instincts, had been struggling with a sudden crisis. The agency was in danger of losing its biggest client, a corporation that had supported them for years. Meetings were held, strategies were drawn, and yet the ideas offered by senior executives fell flat. Pressure mounted as deadlines loomed. Jonathan stayed late one evening, pacing in his office, lines of worry etched deep into his face. It was then that David, carrying a stack of packages, happened to pass by the open door. He paused, sensing the weight in the air. Jonathan looked up, exhausted, and for reasons even he couldn't explain, gestured for David to step inside. Perhaps it was the simplicity of the moment, the need for unfiltered honesty, or the weariness of hearing the same stale corporate jargon from his team. Jonathan asked casually, "David, you see us all day running around with presentations and charts. Tell me, what do you think we're missing?" David froze, unsure if it was a genuine question or a cruel trick. But when he looked at Jonathan's tired eyes, he realized the man wanted the truth. He spoke slowly at first, then with more confidence. He pointed out that the agency's campaigns, though polished, often missed the human connection. He explained that people, especially working-class families like his own, didn't respond to abstract slogans. They responded to authenticity, to messages that reflected their daily struggles and aspirations. He even shared examples of how he and Angela decided where to spend their limited money, influenced not by flashy promises, but by stories they could relate to. Jonathan listened, and the longer David spoke, the more he felt something shift. Here was a man with no formal seat at the table, yet with an insight sharper than most of his executives. What David said was not only true, but vital. It was exactly the perspective the agency had lost. By the time David stopped speaking, nervous about overstepping, Jonathan leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "You've just given me the clearest direction I've heard in weeks." Over the next few days, Jonathan invited David into more conversations. He asked him to review drafts of campaigns, to give feedback from the standpoint of the everyday consumer. Word began to spread through the office that the delivery man was spending time in the CEO's office. Whispers turned into gossip, and gossip turned into resentment, especially for Richard and Claire. To them, the idea that someone they had ridiculed could have the ear of the CEO was intolerable. They mocked him more openly, calling him Jonathan's charity project, and sneering at Angela when she visited, saying she must be enjoying her husband's new imaginary promotion. But Jonathan was not blind. He noticed the subtle cruelty, the way Richard and Claire spoke down to David, the way others followed their lead. Instead of confronting them immediately, he observed, he saw how David, even when mocked, remained steady. He saw how Angela greeted everyone with grace despite the whispers. Their dignity, in the face of hostility, struck him more deeply than he expected. Weeks passed, and with David's insights guiding new strategies, the agency managed to save its largest client. In fact, the campaign they produced resonated so strongly that the client renewed their contract with even greater enthusiasm. The success was undeniable. At a celebratory meeting, Jonathan stood before his team and gave credit where it was due. He spoke about the importance of listening to voices often ignored, about the power of humility and perspective. Then, to the shock of nearly everyone in the room, he announced that David would be joining the management team, not as a token gesture, but as someone whose contribution had proven vital to the agency's survival. The applause was hesitant at first, scattered and uncertain. Richard and Claire sat frozen, disbelief painted on their faces. But the announcement was final, and in that moment, the hierarchy they had used to mock David collapsed. The man they once ridiculed as poor and unworthy was now their manager. For David, the journey was surreal. He had not sought revenge, nor had he planned for this outcome. He only wanted to provide for his wife, to hold on to dignity in a world that often tried to strip it away. Yet here he stood, recognized for his worth not by his background or status, but by the clarity of his ideas and the strength of his character. Angela, watching from the back of the room, felt tears well in her eyes. She had always believed in him, but to see the world finally acknowledge what she had known all along was a moment beyond words. Still, the story did not end with the announcement. Hit the subscribe button for next part and do not forget to like the video.